Okay, welcome to the June South Jersey Men's Club meeting. We had a couple of logistics problems this morning, so I apologize for what's happened. Do we have any guests or any potential new members here? Yes. Okay, well, how about standing up and tell us something about yourself in about 1 minute?
Hello, Jack. Hey, Jack. Tell us about
Randall Allen. I came because you guys advertised in The Voice.
Yes.
I wanted to come and see what's going on.
You will love us. You better have brought a good appetite.
I loved it before I got it.
Oh, okay.
Welcome, Randall.
Yes, sir.
Alan Foreman, guest of Ed Stein. Thank you.
Okay. So, well, how come you left Ed Stein away? Anybody else? Okay, we're going to do the motzi and then have breakfast. What I would like to see is anybody who has some form of physical disability and needs additional time, I'd like them to go up there first.
That's everybody.
Yeah, I know that. Okay.
We didn't say emotional disability.
Since we have, because he made that rotten joke. Since he made that rotten joke, Jerry Mitzner, how about doing the motzi? Excellent and freshen. Okay, this is the June meeting, and in the June meeting, our bylaws state that we're supposed to give a status about the South Jersey Men's Club. And the two main things to talk about typically are membership and financials, but our financial VP is not here today, so we'll let him do that the next time. So I'll do the membership.
Who is it? Who's your buddy?
Phil Godaroff. He's a lawyer, an attorney. Phil Godaroff. All right, so for membership, in 2017, where we finished up last year, August 31st, we had 119 people who were members of SJMC. 2018, which actually ends at the end of August, currently we're sitting at 118. Now, that sounds really, really great. What's much more fascinating, however, is that if we subtract from the 118, now let's just make it round numbers 120. If we subtract the amount of guys that are involved with baseball, softball, and let's just take it down to a round number of 100. Our average participation at a breakfast is between 50 and 55 people, which means we're getting 50% of our people who show up at a meeting. I challenge any of you to look at any synagogue or any organization and claim that they have that amount of people who show up to a meeting. So I think we've all done a great thing. A couple of other things that we are doing that we did this past year, the web design. Starting in September, when we start our new year, you will have the ability to pay via the web, which will make things nice and easy. It's going to be a simple little pull down. You provide your credit card number, and that's all it takes. There's no extra charge because you're using your credit card. Also, the web page design, there'll be a new front page. Right now, it's not the optimum, but please, if you have the opportunity, get on the web, take a look at it. If you want to look at certain documents that are only available to members of SJMC, you have to sign on. And I had sent out an email several months ago, so you get that opportunity also. So please try it out. Take a look. From the standpoint of organization, we are reorganizing internally to better utilize our manpower. Essentially, it'll be almost the same, but it'll be where people can take more responsibility and run subcommittees so that we run more efficiently. Okay, that takes care of that part of the business. Dave Wynn, where are you, Dave Wynn? Dave would like to talk about theater tickets. Movie tickets.
On the table over there, you may see, and I have it right here, is a flyer that, from JCC about the movie On the Map. And what it says is the documentary recounts the against all odds story of the 1977 Maccabi Tel Aviv basketball team's victory in the European Championship, which put Israel firmly on the map. The tickets are on sale if you buy it from the JCC at $12. I have 3 tickets left. The board bought 10 tickets, 3 tickets left at $11. So does anybody want to buy 11? And the show, by the way, is this Wednesday the 27th. It's going to be at Best Sholem, and it's 7 o'clock. Anybody want to buy one of these 3 remaining tickets? Going, gone.
Okay, thank you. Dick Knopf will present any new member with their tags, so he will probably have to call by name since it's pretty tough to spot individuals at any particular table.
Well, first of all, we have, I think it's been announced, 2 guests, right? Jack Karp.
Yeah, I was introduced before.
You were introduced. Jack, get up and tell us a little bit about yourself. You don't get away that easy.
I've been practicing law in this area for 20 years, and I'm recently
And Randall has some interesting. Hey, Randall, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I've been in the area since 1976. I was moved here from New York. My daughter was 3 weeks old. So I'm a South Jersey guy, not so much a New York guy, for 42 years. And I retired 3 years ago at 63 from Guardian Protection Security.
Oh.
Signs in front of your houses, the pink and purple, Guardian Alliance. I was their representative, New Jersey, PA, and Delaware.
Nice.
And I'm enjoying retirement and looking for a couple other ventures. I just survived a major car accident May 3rd. And by the grace of God or my brother looking down on me, I'm here. It could have been worse. And I'm looking for other things to get into.
Well, you found the right group.
What part of New York?
From Brooklyn and Queens.
Okay.
Right. And
Manhattan and Bronx.
Yes,
and we have
the old JCC on set.
Alan Foreman, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm originally from the Boston area. Still talk like that a little bit.
Yeah.
There's your landsman back there.
How about me? I'm from
I'm
Boston.
an ophthalmologist. Still do
Oh, really? Still working?
volunteer.
Very nice. Okay. Anybody else with any other guests by any chance? These name tag. Alan Haber, are you here? No.
Oh, keep on.
Larry Bernstein lost his name tag. Larry, are you here?
Lloyd's not here.
Lloyd's not here.
No.
And Scott
Scott.
Yorker. Hey, finally found. Have an extra name tag. We do that now. We do doubles because people lose them all the time.
You
Here go,
can't lose
bud.
both at the same time, otherwise you're not going to get another one.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right, matching.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have
Marty,
one.
you have yours, and Joel Weiner.
Joel Wiener?
Wiener, Joe Weiner? No, okay, very good.
Thank you, Dick.
You're welcome.
The last item, Don Weisenstein wasn't able to be here. He had something more important called babysitting. So he asked me to mention about fantasy football. The fantasy football team is going to have their meeting at the end of August, where we're going to do our wonderful draft to pick our great teams that are going to all get injured. But we're looking for minimally one more person or persons that can work together so they'll have their own team. So is there anybody here who's currently not in the fantasy football who might even be interested? Okay. Well, that ends that then. In order to allow our speaker to have sufficient time, I've cut the amount of rhetoric that has to be done for business to a minimum. So, Dave, would you like to introduce Rabbi?
It's a pleasure to introduce Rabbi Benjamin David, Senior Rabbi of Abbot Emmanuel in Mount Laurel, who's written a new book, 7 Days, Many Voices. Please welcome Rabbi Ben David.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be with you, and I'm so thrilled that I can be here with you. My plan is to say a little bit about the book, where it came from, a little bit of what it's about, but then just to hear your questions and answer your questions. I was told to sort of introduce myself maybe a little more extensively. So I know some of you. I'm looking forward to getting to know the rest of you. I grew up in Cherry Hill. Some of you know my father, Rabbi Jerry David at Temple Emmanuel. So I grew up in Cherry Hill, Bret Hart, Beck, East. I have 2 younger brothers. They are not rabbis. That's a question I get 3 times a day. I went to Muhlenberg College in Pennsylvania. I was the first ever rabbi to have gone to Muhlenberg College, a Lutheran affiliated school, which incidentally now is the 3rd Jewish. I went then to the Hebrew Union College, that's the Reform Seminary. I spent my first year in Israel. I lived in Jerusalem for 1 year. And then came back to the New York City campus for 4 years, so a 5-year program. I then did a postgraduate year at Columbia, living in New York City, also teaching, and then went on to become associate rabbi at Temple Sinai in Roslyn, New York, on the North Shore of Long Island. And I heard people referencing Queens. We lived in Queens throughout that time, my wife and I. Forest Hills. We all know Forest Hills, yeah, 69th Avenue. And I had 7 very good years there at Temple Sinai in Roslyn, eye-opening years. It was a different world in a lot of ways. I was around sometimes challenging people. There was a lot of money. There's a culture it all felt in some ways challenging, but in a lot of ways really wonderful. To sort of grow up as a rabbi in that community. I met some remarkable people, and I worked with a fabulous senior rabbi. And then came the opportunity to essentially come back home. Adith Emmanuel was looking for a new senior rabbi. Rabbi Richard Levine, who maybe some of you knew, was winding down in his career and transitioning to emeritus. Rabbi Andy Bossoff had been there for a couple of years. And so I threw my name into the hat and saw it as really a wonderful possibility. And long story short, here we are. I've been at Adith Emmanuel now 6 years. 6 years. And it's a wonderful congregation. Bringing Jewish life to Burlington County, breathing new life into Mount Laurel and Moorestown. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing at Adith Emmanuel. I have 3 young kids. A girl and 2 boys. They are 10, 8, and 5. My wife Lisa is the director of Camp Harlem, which is the Reform overnight camp in the Poconos. Maybe some of you know Camp Harlem. That's incidentally where the 2 of us met when we were 11. So, so this is the bio. I'm also, in addition to being a writer, I love writing, I'm also a big runner. And I was asked to say a word about that, and I started a not-for-profit that brings together religious leaders to run and raise money in the name of shared causes. And we've run in the name of causes around Israel and around autism and homelessness and a number of really important causes. I've run 18 marathons and about 25 half marathons, including New York City 4 times and the Boston Marathon twice, including the year of the bombing. I was there, right there. So we're currently in the process of trying to get 50 rabbis together to run the 50th New York City Marathon, which will be 2020. So stay tuned. That'll be a good story, if and when it happens. Okay, so that's the bio. Should I go home? That was pretty good. Round of applause. Okay, so on to the book. So really a number of years ago, 2015, I had this idea that what the world is sort of lacking, perhaps, is a new reading on the story of creation. We all know the story of creation. God created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day God rested. We all know the story. We're told the story from our earliest days in religious school, preschool. Even my 5-year-old knows the basics of the story of creation. But it feels like there's room there for us to sort of delve deeper, to think deeply about what this story really is conveying, how to read it perhaps in a more nuanced way. I think a lot of us are left with a rather elementary understanding of the story of creation. Just as in many cases, a lot of us are left with a rather elementary understanding of Torah, right? We study it in Hebrew school, in religious school, we learn about Noah's Ark, it's all lovely, and then we go off and we live our lives. The creation story is sort of emblematic of that truth. So I presented this idea to a rabbi that I knew and had worked with as an intern in rabbinic school. I interned at a big Jewish press. And she and I have maintained a relationship throughout the years. I would edit manuscripts for her and come to her with ideas, and she would occasionally ask me to write stuff. I was an English major at Muhlenberg, and I really love and sort of live in that world. So I came to her and I said, this is my idea, an anthology that allows us to explore in a much more sort of intellectual way the story of creation, and maybe from angles that have never been explored, right? What would it look like if we really sort of explored creation from the point of view of, say, human rights, or gender, or parenting, or the environment, or Zionism? What does the creation story sort of lend to those conversations? She liked the idea. She didn't love the idea. I had to convince her a little bit. We sort of went back and forth, and I eventually put together a big proposal. As you can imagine, sort of getting a Jewish book published in today's world is no easy task, right? Who's going to read it? How's it going to be used? How's it going to be misused? Right, so there's a lot of trepidation. If you're going to sort of get the green light, it's only going to come after significant questions and answers. So we eventually came to the idea that this book, among many other things, would allow us to sort of showcase the great diversity of thinking that exists within the Jewish community. Look how diverse we are. Well, we come from different places. We represent different ideological and political points of view. That maybe this book, among everything else, would allow us to sort of showcase that great diversity. Celebrate the diversity that exists within the Jewish community. Right? We live in a world where we're often at odds with each other, right? Banging our heads together. This would allow us to sort of celebrate the fact that we're a diverse community. Diverse ideologically and intellectually. So I got the green light. Long story short, I got the green light. And then came the rather daunting task of sending about 50 invites out to rabbis and teachers that I greatly respected, telling them about this little project of mine, and essentially begging them to please be a part of it, because the book will be nothing without you specifically as a contributor. And so I sent that out. I sent it out to teachers I had, to writers that I knew, to some big rabbis doing some great important work. And I would say 99% said yes, which was so heartening that they would think highly of this project, and they would buy in. And so then I sent them a very specific ask. Well, now that you said yes, here's what I need from you. And then I lost a couple people after that email, which was fine. And eventually we had a working manuscript of roughly 42 essays, 6 essays on each of the days of creation, right? So really sort of peeling back each of the individual days of creation, and allowing some of Judaism's best thinkers to weigh in on each of these days of creation. And I had the somewhat unenviable task of editing my teacher's essays, which was a rather humbling sort of process for me. And then finally we really did have a complete manuscript, which was published at the end of which was published last summer, summer 2017, and the book has been very well received. It's really been very well received. It's been submitted for all kinds of awards within the Jewish community, outside of the Jewish community. People are reading it. People are using it to teach. People are giving it to their children and grandchildren, saying, "Here, go read this. There's something in here for you." Right? The beauty of an anthology like this is 42 essays. One of them will speak to you. Right? At the very least, one of them will speak to you. Hopefully, a lot of them will speak to you, but at the very least, one of them will speak to you. And that's the book. That's the book in a nutshell. All about creation, really sort of thinking about creation in new ways, bringing this very old story to life, allowing it to shed light on the world we live in today. That's the book. Here, I'll show you. Here's what it looks like. 7 days, many voices. I didn't think of the title. I wish I could take credit for that. I think it's a good title. Insights into the Biblical Story of Creation, Rabbi Benjamin David, editor. And here it is. So I'm really proud of it. I'm really, really proud of it. I feel good about this book. I feel that it contributes something to the dialogue that we're all engaged in around Jewish life and what does it mean to be a Jew in 2018. This book has a lot to say about that. So why don't I pause there? I've already spoken a lot. It feels like I'm talking a lot. Why don't I field your questions about anything I've said, anything you're curious about, any question's a good question. I will answer it. I'll do my best.
The question I want to know is, are the rabbis that you spoke to, are they all from the Reform, Conservative?
Oh, good question. Many of them are Reform rabbis, as I'm a Reform rabbi, but not all. And there are Orthodox rabbis, Conservative rabbis, and also not every contributor is a rabbi. Some of them, there's a PhD in Talmud, actually 2 PhDs in Talmud in the book. There's a cantor who writes something, a couple of professors. So my goal was diversity, great diversity. I'll tell you that originally, and this is why the book was maybe delayed in sort of getting that proposal straight, it was meant to be an anthology that captured all faith traditions, right? What does every religion have to say about this creation story? Because as you may or may not know, this is a biblical text that we share with our Muslim brothers and sisters, our Christian brothers and sisters, but that proved to be so daunting. Because how do we include everyone? There's no way without the anthology being 1,000 pages long. So we had to narrow the focus a little bit, but there's still diversity within it. It's a good question. Yes?
Where's the book available?
The book is available. Well, first of all, I have a big box that I'm happy to autograph and make out a copy to you and all of your friends. So if and when we inevitably sell out of these books today, because I only have so many, Amazon or anywhere books are sold, I'm sure. Yeah. Yes?
Can you give us an example, take a day of creation, and give us an example of how a story there relates to what we're doing here, as you said?
Okay, so that's a great question. So, let's pick, for instance, the day in which we learn of the creation of the creatures of the sea, right? So there, it's a nice sort of biblical tale that all the fish and the whales and the sharks are all created. And when you're, 8 years old, we can picture sort of that as sort of this very sort of almost mythic sort of fairy tale. But for those of us who are interested in thinking about this in a serious way, we would think about, okay, well, what are we doing in this day and age to care for the oceans and the seas? What are we doing about pollution when it comes to that? Or for instance, what are we doing about drinking water, right? How many communities in our world live without access to clean drinking water, right? So it's taking sort of a seed from the story of creation and bringing it to the very real world that we live in today. For instance, yeah.
I lived 2 months and taught in a public school in Israel, part of a sabbatical situation with the district that I was involved in. The question I ask you, Rabbi, is, I'm Reformed like you, and when I was in Israel, even in the public situation, if you're Reformed, they look upon you as if you're sort of like Christian. Do you have trouble with the other rabbis in Orthodox? Are you treated as an equal when you're hanging around them?
So that's a good question. I'll parse your question. So first of all, I would say, because we're a South Jersey group here, the relationship among the rabbis of South Jersey is as strong as ever. We're pals, we're friends. I go out to lunch regularly with all of your rabbis. I'm close with Rabbi Epstein at Sons of Israel. I'm close with Rabbi Mendy at Chabad. Yitzhak Kahan and I live right down the street from each other, and he's in Medford. He's the Chabad of
How are you treated in New York City?
So, I can't speak for New York City. I'm not there, but
you're not treated as an equal.
well, I will. So just to speak to my own experience, and I think part of it is the rabbis who live here finding a way to look past stereotype and cliche and to see us as fellow colleagues and human beings, right? If I bought into the worst of the worst stereotypes about the ultra-Orthodox, I would be handcuffed, I'd be paralyzed, right? If I saw my friend Mendy Mengel as a human being, which I do, I see him as a colleague, I see him as a friend. We don't agree on everything. Our understanding of Torah differs in various ways, but we're friends and pals. The question about Israel, so yes, once upon a time, you said that Reform Jews were seen as Christians. I would go further and say Reform Jews were seen as aliens, right? That who are we? Where do you come from? What language are you speaking? That's changing. Today in Israel, there's close to 50 Reform synagogues, including, they just now ordained the 100th Israeli Reform rabbi, right? So, it's not to say the game has changed, but it is changing a little bit. And Israelis are learning that there are other choices beyond just religious and secular, which is how it was for ages, right? The synagogue that I don't go to is Orthodox. That's sort of the saying, right? But that's changing a little bit, right? A Judaism that is a little more egalitarian, a Judaism that is a little more progressive. Israelis are buying into that, right? They are, in a lot of ways, similar to us. They want a Judaism that's relevant, that's accessible. So the game is changing. There's still work to be done. And there are a lot of issues in Israel that speak to that, right? The issues around whose conversion counts, whose marriage counts, who gets to pray where at the Western Wall. All of these are issues that are alive and well and speak to the fact that Reform and conservative Judaism have a way to go still in Israel. Yes?
Yeah, I'm also curious about the book itself and how it was put together. My daughter happens to be an editor for a medical publishing company. She tells me how difficult it can be to get the doctors and the other people to submit their information. Now, it's a little different than what you're going through, but can you give us a little more insight as to what it was like to get those manuscripts?
Right. Well, I can't speak to doctors, but I can say for sure that chasing after rabbis is exhausting. These rabbis are busy people. So, some were great with the deadlines, and if you had to submit your draft of your essay by November 1st, I got it by November 1st. And then there are those that I had to chase after. That there's a blessing and a curse to sort of putting together an anthology. The blessing is you have all of these voices, you have all these varying opinions. The curse is that you're on 42 people's schedules and trying to sort of chase after them to sort of get them to cooperate. Including some people, there are people in this book who are deans of the rabbinic school and, some very sort of important people. So there was a little bit of a delicate dance where I said to my own dean, by the way, you're a week late. If it's okay, I'm asking very gingerly, no offense. If it's okay, please submit your essay. So yes, that was a bit of a task.
Did you take people from across the country, from coast to coast?
From across the world, yeah, from across the world. All across North America, there are multiple Israeli authors in the book, Israeli rabbis. So there's real...
LA, from California.
Yes, yes. Everywhere you can imagine in the U.S. and Israel. Yes, in the...
Me?
Yes.
There's a movie called The Martian with Gary Sinise. Did anybody ever see that?
What's the name of the movie?
The Martian. And
oh, yeah.
He ends up on Mars and he sees this image of this woman that might be a god or goddess or something, and she starts to show him different things about how the earth and the world would evolve, and then she starts showing him about the creation of mankind. And it always kind of stuck in my heart where it starts with the ocean.
Right.
And
right.
That's relevant to the theory of religion.
Right. Well, I think, one of the things I haven't said much about yet is that every community, every faith tradition has their own creation story or myth, right? We need to know how we got here. It matters to us where we come from. And I think in today's day and age especially, we live in a world where often people are losing sight of history, origins, what are our roots, right? In an age of social media and immediacy, our kids, we're losing track of that increasingly. So this book serves, among everything else, as a reminder of where we come from and why that origin matters, why our tradition and our history matters, maybe more than ever.
You take a scientific approach, like the Big Boom, the box, that the earth was created outside God?
Well, you'll see even sort of right out of the bat in the introduction that I write to the book, I say a lot of us sort of diminish or even denigrate the creation story by either saying, yes, I buy in wholeheartedly to the story of creation, or I buy in wholeheartedly to the story of evolution. And I say as a Reformed Jew, as a citizen of the 21st century, I believe in both. Clearly science matters, and the story of evolution has been proven time and again to be a factual story. And yet, we can also believe over here in a story of creation which gives shape as to not necessarily how we got here, but maybe why we're here. So the two stories, I think, can work hand in hand. And one of the great essays in the book is by a rabbi who's a PhD and teaches at Princeton named Jeff Middleman. And he started a group called Sinai and Synapses, which is all about the intersection of science and religion, which is a growing field all the time. As if to say, you don't have to choose one or the other. It's possible that we can embrace the sort of contradictory nature of things here. That's okay. I think we sort of give greater credence to both when we do that. So, yes, a lot of hands.
Is there a difference how the Judaism and its multiple sects and Christianity and Islam address the creation story as you've said?
Right. Well, I think in each faith tradition there's great diversity of opinion around this story, right? So just as in Judaism, for me to say what I just said, which is the story of evolution is valid, that would be blasphemy in some Jewish rooms, right? That how dare I say anything but God created the world in 6 days, end of story. So just as we have that diversity within Judaism, I think within Christianity, certainly there is that. Within Islam, there certainly is that. So it's not so much a question of what do religions believe, but within religions, there's such diversity, which is good, which is healthy. Other questions?
How did you handle the role of women, and did that sort of change as you got your input from the different rabbis?
There's a lot of female contributors to the book. There are a number of sort of feminist, sort of leaning essays within the book, right? The story of creation often is read not as the most sort of feminist narrative, right? Sort of Eve is an afterthought almost in both of the creation narratives, right? Because remember, there are two creation stories in Genesis. So part of some of the essays in the book sort of redeem Eve. You know, who is Eve? And how can we in our own world sort of work to redeem not only Eve, but the other, right? Sort of that sort of prototypical other. Because that's a challenging piece of the story. That is a challenging piece of the story. At least it is for me.
Did you assign a day of creation to each of these people, or did you allow them to choose whichever one they
No, I sought out specific people to write specific essays because I knew they had something to say about it. Each of the contributors are experts in a given area, and I knew that. So I sought them out and I said specifically, I want you to write this essay about this topic. Not everyone listened, but that was my ask. Yes?
With the ones you're using now, contemporary rabbis, have you, I imagine you're familiar with the early period rabbis, and did you see like an evolution or a lot of changes, or I guess that's really
right.
Comparing the two.
Yeah. Well, I think both ways. I think obviously tradition is referenced time and again in the book, right? So what did Maimonides believe when it came to creation? What did Rashi believe? Ibn Ezra, Martin Buber, right? Sort of through the span of Jewish commentators over time. But what was also fascinating is these sort of great historic thinkers, even dating back to Maimonides, who died in 1204. They, in their own right, were sort of progressive in their reading of creation at times, right? So to sort of undo the kind of misperception that we suddenly in our own age are so enlightened about the story of creation and sort of readings of Torah, they were asking many of the same questions that we're asking today. That was a sort of fascinating revelation.
If I could just expand a bit on the question that I was in.
Oh.
Not so much how did they treat the women as far as the evolution is concerned, but how are they dealing with the role of women today, especially when you have the various sects which treat women considerably different.
Right. So how does that come out in the book? I'm not sure if the book speaks so much to sort of the ways in which women are represented differently in each of the different denominations of Judaism, because I think you're exactly right. I think depending on which synagogue you walk into, which denomination you're a part of, the role of women, the status of women varies significantly. And that's true, and I think that's always been true. I'm not sure if the book takes on exactly that question. The book is interested in Eve. It's interested specifically in the story of creation. And, you know, as much as we sort of stretched the story of creation and applied it to all sorts of different fields, there's some places where we couldn't sort of intellectually make the leap. As much as we all want to sort of weigh in on every issue, creation doesn't speak to every issue. So we had to be sort of intellectually honest in that regard. But you're right. And maybe that's the next book. I don't know. I will say, you know, that this sort of model has been well received, of sort of taking one biblical text and then sort of filtering it through 50 different thinkers and teachers. So, for instance, one of the things I'm talking now with the editor is the 10 Commandments. And what if we took each of those 10 Commandments and said to a group of rabbis, okay, you take on commandment number 3. You take on commandment number 8. Right? Or another area where I'm interested in taking it is to the binding of Isaac. Right? The story of the binding of Isaac, Akedat Yitzchak. Right? This quintessential, this very challenging story. What would it look like if we asked 40 rabbis to weigh in on the binding of Isaac? That could be pretty fascinating. So we'll see. We'll see if I have the energy for it. We'll see. Who knows? Maybe a concluding question or two. Is that about where we are in time? Yeah, maybe.
You got all that one.
Yeah.
It's one question.
One question. Here it comes.
It can be a long story. What's going to happen to halacha, the rules of a Jew?
What's going to happen to it?
Yes.
What's going to happen to halacha? What do you mean?
Well, we do have halacha rules and regulations.
True.
Of being a Jew.
True.
Our ancestors carried it from Europe and even before that. And Nazi Germany and all that. Now I'm going to ask you the question. What happens to halacha, the rules and regulations that we was handed down to us by Moshe and all of that?
You mean going forward as a people?
That's right.
So the question, which is a good, fair question, also a very hard question, is sort of where are we going with regard to halacha? You know, halacha, it's a word, maybe you've heard that before. It basically means the ways in which we carry out the mitzvot, right? So we're told, for instance, to light 2 Shabbat candles on a Friday night, one to observe and one to remember the Sabbath. But the halacha comes sort of chiming in and say, here's how you do it specifically in practice. Some movements take halacha very seriously and run with it very literally, and some movements are less committed to halacha. I think, to answer your question, halacha will always be a part of the Jewish people, just as halacha has always been a part of the Jewish people. I would also say that halacha has been an ever-evolving process, right? So the ways in which we sort of carry out our Judaism on a daily basis, that's changed over the last 3,000 years, in some ways that are drastic, and in some ways that are not so drastic. So I think halacha is here to stay, and I think it'll always evolve as it has always evolved.
Just one question. Let's leave Holocaust out of it and just bring in halacha, laws and regulations that was handed down to our people. Our ancestors sitting here, their fathers, their mothers.
Yeah.
That brought over here even from Europe.
Yeah, sure.
So what happens now to the Holocaust? Holocaust, yeah. What happens to the halacha, the rules and regulations of a Jew?
Well, like I said, the rabbis have always been in the process of sort of interpreting the mitzvot and making them real in our lives, saying here's how you carry out the actual mitzvot. So halacha is not going anywhere. Halacha matters. It's an integral part of Judaism, and God willing, it'll always be a significant part of Judaism.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know how to do this, but I have a big box of books. I'd love to make out a book to you and to all your friends and your children and grandchildren, and maybe it's a nice gift. I don't know. This is a big commercial. So if you'd like, this is what the book looks like. I think it's $18, which always presents a problem because you hand me a 20 and then what? So if you hand me a 20, the $2 we can send to, how about I donate it back to South Jersey Men's Club? Is that good? At the end of the day, that would be a good way to do it. So so that's the book. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Rabbi,
Very nice.
it's very for you. It was
Thank
a great
you.
presentation. We have to have you.
Of course. Good?
We have one more duty for you. You have to make one person happy.
Oh, let's see.
The winning share is $52.
735-899. 899.
Not even close. 899?
There you go.
Oh, come on. Hey, last chance to buy the ticket for the movie. $11. Such a bargain.